Hello, everyone. Now let me introduce the speakers of today. We have two of them. The first one is Kaliisa, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Education with the University of Oslo in Norway. His research focuses on learning analytics, mobile learning, and computer-supported collaborative learning. He is an active member of the international research community, serving on several society boards, including SOLAR for a few more weeks, one more week till next week. He's also co-founder of the African Network for Learning Analytics, a special interest group with SOLAR dedicated to advancing learning analytics research and practice across Africa. Currently, his research explores how multimodal learning analytics can support and improve group collaboration and learning dynamics in professional higher education settings. Our second speaker is Mohammad Saqr. He's an associate professor of computer science at the School of Computing at the University of Eastern Finland, where he leads the Learning Analytics unit. He has published extensively on learning analytics, network analysis, and artificial intelligence. And he has also authored 2 books on learning analytics methods that are quite available. His work has received several international recognitions. For example, the SOLAR Europe Emerging Scholar in 2023 and several Best Paper awards, including LAK24 last year. He's currently working on advancing transition network analysis method and all issues related to complexity and individual differences. Today, they will present a work that received the Best Paper award at LAK24 last year in Japan. This work presents the current status of evidence about the impact of learning analytics dashboards on students' learning outcomes, participation, motivation, and attitudes. I don't want to take more of your time, so Mohammed, I hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Iona, for a great presentation and introduction. Welcome to everyone who is joining us wherever you are joining us. My name again is Kaliisa, and I'll be co-presenting our best paper from LAK last year, together with my colleague Mohammad Saqr. But before I begin, I want to recognize our collaborators on this project, including Camila Sonsoles and Muhammad Khalil, who are some of them are online. So this is a team effort that we work together, but we'll be trying to present some of the results together with Muhammad. So the paper we are going to present is available online, open access, and that is Have Learning Analytics Dashboards Lived Up the Hype. So you can find it online. You realize that in the discussion we may not, or the presentation we may not touch on each and every aspect, but I think the best avenue is to get in and read the paper in detail. In today's presentation, we have decided that we, first of all, give a small kind of little background, at least for people who are not so much into learning analytics dashboards, just to provide the context of what we actually mean and what do we mean when we talk about learning analytics dashboards, which I think will help us to get a good grip of the entire discussion. Learning analytics dashboards, I think it's a phenomena, or it's kind of an aspect that is kind of familiar to different people. I mean, if we think about use different kind of examples away from learning, or if we talk about car dashboards or whatever, I think we can look at this as simple tools that provide visualization about different phenomena. But in this aspect, at least from a learning analytics perspective, these are visualizations that provide different kind of indicators about the learning process. And this could be in multiple kind of visualizations. We are going to see some examples where we find dashboards presented as graphs, some are being presented as reports. So depending on how they are presented in different ways, but whatever way they are presented, usually they are made for the purpose of empowering teachers and learners to make informed decisions about the learning process. So examples of learning analytics dashboards, I think if you talk about dashboards, I think it's very hard to talk about dashboards in learning analytics without mentioning the signals. Course Signals was one of the kind of flagship kind of projects in learning analytics back in 2012 by researchers from Purdue University, where they had this tool that was providing information to the to the teachers about how students were actually progressing in courses through red and green and red signals. And this was mainly to advise faculty on whether the students are at risk of failing or dropping out of the course. And then the student teachers could actually use this kind of information to provide support or information that is needed for the students. But there are also other different types of dashboards. Recently, colleagues from Monash University, they had a dashboard that they worked on during COVID that was on providing teachers with information regarding what students do when they are interacting with documents, for example, in Google Docs, but also when they are in Zoom breakout rooms. For example, the environment we are in now, this tool could help in providing to know what students are actually doing in the different breakout rooms and what they are also doing in the different Google Docs. So it was also to provide kind of awareness and support for the teachers to monitor the progress of the work that the students actually going on, working with. Another popular dashboard we have is the AI dashboard at the Open University. This is one of the most kind of extensive dashboard that is widely used. And this is also because this is an institution with very many students, and they have thousands of students, and this dashboard is usually used to predict students' performance, but also whether students are going to drop out. But it's also mainly dashboard that is mainly used by teachers to predict grades, but also to see whether students need support in different ways. Besides dashboards that are mainly based on online kind of learning, we also have dashboard, for example, from the Monash group that is based on physical interaction. So these are students working with simulations, and they get this information or multimodal data presented to the students in terms of a dashboard to tell them what they did well and what challenge did they actually have during the interactions. So this is a kind of a different kind of approach if you look at the others that are actually based on data that is based on online or digital traces. In my own PhD, I worked on a dashboard called CADA, and in this dashboard we're helping teachers to gain awareness about what students do when they work in online discussions. So here it was mostly what are the key concepts used by the students, what kind of networks are they, what are the social kind of interactions students engage in, and then the teachers could use this dashboard as a flipping tool or in a flipped classroom model where they could actually see what students think or how students reason in the course, and then use that information to support adaptive or kind of timely adaptation of course designs. So there are different forms of dashboards, and those are kind of a few examples. And the question is, why do we really mind about learning analysis dashboards? It's very important to talk about learning dashboards because, as we highlight here in this slide, is that learning analysis dashboard is one of the key interventions for learning analytics. When we talk about learning analytics, usually it's very hard for researchers to work with a learning analysis project without ending up with at least something in form of a learning analysis dashboard, because we can collect data, we can analyze data in different ways, but usually the main intervention we use in learning analytics is a dashboard. It's a form of any kind of a tool that is going to provide information either to the teachers, which could be for reflection and decision-making purposes, which could be for learning design and adaptation, as I showed in one of the projects I worked with, but it could also be providing timely feedback to the teachers. Some dashboards are more for students, which could be used to track engagement and motivate students to work, track their progress, and make sense of the kind of materials they are dealing with. But one important thing to note is that whatever role that we look at in dashboards, the most important thing is to actually support students in improving their learning outcomes. That is the main goal of the learning dashboards. We can provide a dashboard for students to raise awareness or sense make, or teachers to provide timely feedback. But the most important part is, what's the end outcome? The end outcome is to see, can we actually support students to improve their learning? So many studies have done work on learning and dashboards, including so many reviews, just like the ones I highlight here. We have a review on learner-facing dashboards, a checklist to guide planning, designing, and implementation, which I co-authored together with my colleague Yuan and Paul Prinsloo. We have another review by Yuan and Maren on preparing like dashboards for education practice, other reviews on self-regulated learning, so many different pieces of work that have been done on learning analytics dashboards. And when we're engaging into this paper together with my team, we looked at all the different studies that are in place and what they talk about learning analytics dashboards. And we realized that there were a lot of insights and a lot of aspects that were raised by these studies. But we also found out that there were some issues that are actually not kind of tackled in a broad sense. One of the things that we found out from these studies that most dashboard studies focus on assessing the tool's usability. For example, you have a dashboard, you design it, and then in the end, the authors try to find out, okay, did this tool work or it didn't work? Others mainly, and then there is little attention on the effect of the learning analytics dashboard. As I highlighted that the most important aspect or the most important part of a learning analytics dashboard is to support and improve learning. But the question is, are these dashboards actually improving learning as intended? Do we have any evidence to show that there is actually the the dashboards were actually achieved the purpose they were designed for? So because there were a few studies also doing this kind of work and doing quantitative kind of analysis of impact, we found it relevant to actually dig into the studies out there and see, okay, for studies that have tried to measure this, can we find any evidence out there? Why is this important? We know that developing learning analytics infrastructure requires a lot of effort. And also as a field, if we are to move forward and we still develop dashboards, but we need to be sure, do we really need to develop more dashboards? What's the problem with the dashboards? Is the problem with the way they are designed? Is the problem the way they are assessed by the researchers? Where is the problem with the learning analytics dashboard? So identifying the absence or presence of evidence definitely provides guidance for future learning analysis researchers, but also designers. If we realize that the problem is the way dashboards are designed, possibly that is something then we can work with to see how we can actually resolve and identify that. So looking at all these gaps, we had a question and went into the study saying, okay, what is the impact of dashboards on learning outcomes? And by learning outcomes, we conceptualize it in form of performance, participation in learning activities, motivation, and attitude. When we started this review, I won't go into the entire process, but when we started with the review process, the intention was to carry out a meta-analysis. When we started extracting the different studies, we realized that most of the studies didn't actually have congruent research setups and statistical information necessary for meta-analysis. That was a bit frustrating because we really wanted to conduct a proper meta-analysis to really establish evidence. But we realized there were also a few studies that actually had enough information. So what we did was we didn't disregard studies that actually reported some information. So when we found studies that reported some quantitative metrics that could allow a meta-analysis, we classified these into subgroups, for example, in terms of performance, and then we look at those that were having indicators that can easily be analyzed together, and then we computed the effect size. But for those studies that didn't have enough information, we still reported this in a quantitative way by just extracting the sample size, effect size, and as you're going to be visualized by Mohammed, we'll see how we actually reported still to get a good understanding of what effect and what kind of information is useful to understand here. So we used Cohen to actually identify or categorize the different studies, and these are the metrics we used. So a value of 0.8 was regarded as large, value of 0.5 medium, 0.2 small, and 0.2 negligible. So at this point, I'm going to give my colleague Mohammed to take you through the results we had across the different elements that I've talked about. So we had different elements ranging from performance and motivation and participation. So Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Rogers, for this really fantastic introduction to the topic. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. I will take over and talk about the study which we've done with my colleagues. I will start by the findings, and usually we start by descriptive statistics. And as you can see, the first study in our review started almost 2015, the one that we could get quantitative metrics from it. And there is an increasing trend of the studies that use dashboards and learning analytics. So the topic is really getting more endorsement and more adoption. Mostly was in higher education than other types of education, and mostly the dashboards evaluated the students and students' impact. Most of the domains were STEM and STEM plus, and less so in other non-scientific technology, engineering, and math topics. Most of the study designs was quasi-experimental, but there was no control group. We had 9 studies which was classified as randomized controlled studies, and we have one single group study, 6, and one exploratory. Okay, and now let's discuss the most important thing. Usually in education, we would try to do an intervention. We look at the impact. If you look at impact, impact is everywhere, and everyone would like to have an impact of anything that we do. It's there in government policies, it's in solar definition. In the second line already, you can find the word measuring and exploring impact. And institutions want to see it. Everyone wants to see impact. And most studied impact is achievement. In our study, we had 38 studies. 14 of them reported negligible effect sizes, 12 reported small, and 5 studies reported large effect size, and 3 medium. But let's have a deeper look at these studies. Most of them use different effect sizes. Some of them, for example, collaborative knowledge building, which, as far as I remember, the teacher evaluated how many vocabulary words they did and how many contribution to the writing task, final grade, pre-post test, grade rank, activity grade, which was somehow measured by the teacher, score after midterm, critical reading ability. So as you can see, we have a very, very wide-ranging effect size type that has been used to measure that effect of the dashboards. But if we go one step further, we can see here that most of the studies were really small, and most of them reported very small effect sizes, or actually negligible one, that kind of light brown one. The largest study that was around in the volume of 3,000 plus students has also reported a small effect or a negligible effect size. If we look at which studies reported positive or negative effect sizes, we will see that most of the study types, their effect sizes were around the 0. The randomized control studies, which we hoped that are really kind of give us some conclusive estimate of the effect or the impact of dashboards, were also around 0. The studies that reported higher impact size were the ones that had used versus not used. And by used versus not used is that they compared students who were actually almost or actually engaged and used the dashboard to the students who were not engaged and did not use the dashboard. In that case, it's a measure of engagement rather than the effect of the dashboard itself. If we look more about the correlation between effect sizes and sample size, we'll see the correlation is almost 0 and not statistically significant, which means no matter the sample size, most of the studies reported not positive statistically or positive effect sizes. If we look at the participation, the picture is a little bit much better. We can see that 8 studies reported positive effect sizes, 5 medium, 5 small. I would like also to say here that sometimes studies counted 2 or 3 times because they reported more than this an effect size, and this is just for demonstration. You can see that people looked at how students participate and how the dashboard helped them be more participatory in their learning. And again, a wide range of effect sizes that were measured, number of comments in a discussion board, number of discussion threads, access to discussion board, unique days, access to LMS, interaction, participation, book count, time reading, cognitive read engagement, and a large array of ways to measure that effect size and participation. But again, if we also look at the effect size versus the sample size, we will see that the larger effect sizes are reported, if you can see here this color, are reported by the studies with very small sample size. We still have this larger studies reports negligible effect size, but very small studies reported really large ones, and especially the non-controlled ones, or at least the ones that has confounding of we measured the students who were engaged using the dashboard and who were not engaged in using the dashboards. And of course, if we plot the sample size versus the effect size reported, we see here highly statistically significant correlation. That is negative. The larger the sample size, the negative, or the more likely the effect size to be small. This is an R of around 0.6 or something, an R squared of 0.35. If you look at motivation, the picture is a bit more mixed. But again, we have 8 studies with negligible effect size, 5 with a small, or 5 effect sizes actually, because some studies here may be counted or twice for demonstration, and only 1 large effect size and 1 medium. And if we look at them, these usually were measured somehow by also self-reporting. So if we see the extrinsic motivation, another study called it motivation together, they are somehow medium effect sizes or close to large. And you can see that very diverse ones. We can also see that some of them were actually negative, for example, like test anxiety or motivation or extrinsic goal orientation. Again, if we look at this, the only studies that reported effect sizes that very high or quite close to large were very small effects, very small sample sizes. And most of the studies reported either negligible or small effect size. If we again look at the correlation, we will see that the correlation is also in the same way. There is a high correlation between effect size in a negative way and the sample size. If we look at the attitude, and most of the attitude measured use self-reported surveys, you can also see that we again have most of the studies between negligible and small effect sizes. And you can see there is really large, wide varying effect sizes measured here. Most of them revolve around 0, and some of them is actually negative. Again, the studies that reported large effect sizes are the small ones with small effect sizes. Again, most of these studies were combined with something else. For example, sometimes they measure the effect of the dashboard, but also the teacher, effect of the dashboard and technology, effect of the dashboard was something else. And again, the smaller sample size, the higher the effect size was reported in the study. So as we can see now, and as we reported in the paper, as we currently stand, evidence is lacking that LADs or learning analytic dashboards has helped students or has helped improve performance. However, since our study did not include one single controlled studies or well-designed, well-powered study to actually give a conclusive answer, we should emphasize here that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. We were not able to find it, and we were not able to report it. But again, randomized and control aside, most of our studies either reported small or negligible effect sizes, and any study that reported a positive effect size, it was almost always confounded by something else. That, for example, doing 2 types of intervention, one of them was the dashboard. We had methodological issues with these methodological issues, for example, combining the dashboard with another type of intervention. We also find something that some studies had this pattern that compared users to non-users. And if people who use it are actually engaged and use other resources, that's a measurement of their engagement, nothing else. We also find some people, or most of the studies who compared the dashboard to others, the dashboard was made available without accounting for the number of accesses or what has actually happened on this dashboard. It was there whether clicked or not, whether used or not. It was assumed that it is part of the intervention. On engagement and attitude and participation, we all saw that there is at least some positive direction that using the dashboard might enhance engagement or participation or students' contribution or students' days online or using the learning management system. We saw that in the results I've just shown. On motivation and attitude, the results were mostly modest, but also mixed. Sometimes it affected some things negatively. And now, let's discuss this result. And I will have to go one step back to a little bit early. In 2018, Catherine Verbert and Eric Doval wrote their really very famous paper about dashboards, and Catherine and the group wrote, "We are very excited about the opportunities for awareness, reflection, sense making, and impact that dashboards provide, and above all, the potential to improve learning." They also said, yes, so far we don't have any study that had demonstrated positive results in evaluation. Some years later, around 3 years later, a study by Schwindeman 2016 reported that most of the studies were exploratory and proof of concept. Joanna Yvette was with us today. She also had a very famous study, and she reported that most of the studies actually did not actually evaluate any cognitive attainment or learning, by evaluated the usability and how the dashboard is usable or can be useful. A little bit, 1 year later, Wanisa Macha and Dragan Gazevic and others made also another study, and they said that, yeah, as most of the existing learning analytic dashboard cannot be suggested to support metacognition, do not offer any information about effective learning tactics and strategies, and have significant limitation in how their evaluation is conducted. Again, an evaluation problem. And the last study that I'm covering now, of course, there are many that I couldn't get, mostly said, the author said, that most of the studies that were pilot and looking at, again, proof of concept, this study by Sosniak et al. 2012. So, and I'm here playing the devil's advocate or giving this kind of a reflection. Maybe there is no impact for dashboards at all. As far as I can know, or as far as my research or my search has actually gone, there is not a single meta-analysis proving that dashboards work in any other field, no matter what the field is. There is none, not a single meta-analysis actually performed. As I searched for several days, maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't found it. But that evidence that any dashboard work whatsoever doesn't exist, or at least I haven't seen it. There are some literature reviews around, mostly come from healthcare. None of them looks, okay, if we use the dashboard, patient will be better. No, they look at improving patient care. This study from 2006 is really very well cited and very well known. They've looked at several databases. They also did a snowball in citation search to look at other papers that may be actually cited here and there that could lead them to something. They got around 11 studies, as far as I remember, and they found that most of the studies reported heterogeneous effect, and most of them were low quality, and the results from them should be treated with caution. Another better study, 2022, a little bit recent, and they looked at the effectiveness of clinical dashboards as audit feedback or clinical decision support tools. The 11 randomized trials were conducted, and what they found that there is limited evidence that dashboards integrated into electronic medical records or users' feedback or for decision support may be associated with improvement in medication use or in test ordering. So again, no conclusive evidence that this can do something. The third study that I also found, what this is one actually is I like, is a meta-analysis about using personal trackers. This is something a little bit different, but also with other types of intervention. They found that it has the potential, not really a very strong statement, to increase physical activity participation. But if you look at the meta-analysis yourself, and you can judge that most of the studies cross the zero, most of the studies, although the means may be a little bit, but most of the studies cross the zero, except for one study, one single study that I can find here, and another one here that gives a really, yeah. But this is the largest evidence I could find that some kind of personal, again, these are personal tracker that trackers many things and also introduce with some other intervention that to improve something. Okay, so as we just said, maybe that impact we are looking for doesn't exist, or maybe it exists for some and not others. And maybe it's time to a little bit change the question, on time to ask for whom does it work or for whom it works, rather than did it work at all? Because let me give that example. Usually when we do research, we aggregate. We combine people that it worked for and people that it made them worse. And if you combine positive and negative, you get neutral studies, because humans or students are naturally heterogeneous. They are diverse. And I will give some examples here. This is a very famous paper in which the author said it's about when or where do you actually take your sample. If we take the sample from this small group, we get an effect size of 0.33. If we take it a bigger sample, we get a lower effect size. If we sample here, we get actually negative effect size. And if we take the whole population, we get the effect size, which is the one that should be reported. But usually in all of our education, we don't really use random samples, we use convenience samples. So our sampling is not usually the one that combines everyone. So again, it matters where do you take or where do you get your sample. Maybe it works for someone, maybe not. And let me make some simulated data. If we have some students, as you can see here, that kind of go down, worsen, and some students who are improving, and we just gather everyone together, we get statistically non-significant results. It doesn't help anyone. But if we use some kind of a heterogeneity identifying mechanism, we can disentangle people who have improved from people who did not improve. As you can see here, it's the same data, but we got people who improve and people who did not improve. And in that case, maybe we can prescribe the dashboards for people that it could help them. 2022, almost 3 years ago, a study was reported in Nature that was really very interesting, that said, yes, not only we are heterogeneous, but there are a large group of people or that we cannot predict in any way. And what they found really very striking is that everyone was going somewhere, and this kind of around 10% of the population were not predictable at all. What was very interesting is that the positive results were heterogeneous and not consistent, but this 10% who are unpredictable were replicated across all outcomes and across all data sets. So what was really consistent and predictable is the unpredictability of some of the students. We did a study last year and we reported almost similar results. We fitted machine learning algorithms for single students. Every single student, we collected their data about self-regulation, and we followed them for 40 days. We got lots of measurement points and created a machine learning algorithm for every student using his own or her own self-data. And what we found is we predicted 4 outcomes. We found that we can predict some of the students almost perfectly, and some of the students are completely unpredictable. So the idea that we will get everyone is not really something that we can rely on. We also looked at, do these students act or behave or learn the same? We found that when we looked at the predictors of their machine learning models, we found not a single student shared the same order of the top predictors, which are simply 5 ones, for any outcomes. We had 4 outcomes. Not any of them shared the order of the average model. So not only the idea of an average or an average person was confirmed, but not even by random chance, we found 2 who shared the 2 best order or the orders of variables. In another study, we looked at how individuals differ, and I will just comment on the enjoyment and anxiety. You can see anxiety is negatively correlated by red here with enjoyment. In another student, it is yes, but it's also not connected to their metacognition. In another student, we found that anxiety, the more that student is anxious, the more they show or they experience metacognition. What I'm trying to say here is that packing everyone in the same sample, aggregating the results, is not possibly going to give us a lot of, conclusive results. As the same study I've shown concluded, we need to acknowledge that most effects are heterogeneous, be it learning analytics, be it dashboards, be it whatever. So the variations in effect estimates across studies that define the replication is to be expected as long as we do not take heterogeneity into account. Yeah, this is Esther Dofolo. She got the Nobel Prize, I think, 2020, because they are treating poverty in India. And one of the landmark of their approach is that they use heterogeneity mechanisms to see whom their poverty treatment will work for. Because just giving everybody the same thing and it would work is not really something. Another study I would like to highlight here, which again confirms the idea that it's time to move to not it worked or did it work to for whom it works. This is a study published in Science, and I have never seen a study on learning published in Science before, and most probably because they have asked the question, where and with whom does a brief social belonging, and you can see it's simply a brief social belonging intervention promote progress in college. So just the intervention is really something one can say it's trivial, but because they answered the question for whom, what made the study with around 35 authors go to Science. And that they said, yes, it improved retention and persistence in school, particularly among historically underrepresented students when the school context offered students opportunity to belong. So again, maybe it works for some and doesn't work for others. And maybe we have, rather than to say, okay, it worked, did it work or not, to start saying for whom it works and how it works for these guys or for this subpopulation. Thank you so much. I would like to say that, yeah, maybe we had the opportunity to talk today, but in no way we have our colleagues and friends did really the most of the effort on the paper, and we should really thank them all on it. And yeah, if you like the ideas that you heard today, at least about individuality and heterogeneity, we have highlighted all of them in our new book, Advanced Learning Analytics Methods, which you can access by going to lamethods.org or by getting this barcode. I think I didn't cross the time.
No, I think we're all good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We have 18 minutes for questions, and there have been, or the chat has been very active, starting with some simpler questions that Rogers and Sonsoles very promptly answered them. We have also some a bit more complex, and for that, I would like to ask Anne, maybe to elaborate a bit on her question. If not, I can also read it.
Yes,
Great,
no,
thank you.
In some, systematic review that I'm doing, I'm also finding a lot of the same problems that you're finding about people not defining things and not measuring what they say they're measuring or measuring too many things. And so I'm just wondering, from what you have discovered through this, what recommendations specifically would you make, like you would want to see to have evidence that a learning analytic dashboard of a particular type might work for a particular type of student in a particular type of condition?
Well, you have already answered that, Anne. Exactly what you said. We need people to say what a particular learning analytics dashboard worked in what and what kind of population. And also, please do not mix intervention types. And of course, again, if our goal is to prove that dashboards are effective, then we shouldn't mix them with other things. Maybe sometimes I would believe, for example, like again, like medical people, they don't really do single interventions. They usually added interventions. So if we have teachers on both sides and then some people had dashboards or not, that there should be some consistency in that. It's not really difficult at all. Again, I don't blame the studies. I have the utmost respect for everyone who did this study. Their goal was to evaluate a local or an experiment they did. They when they designed these studies, that it wasn't in their mind to contribute to a future meta-analysis. You get what I mean? So here it's not that we are trying to blame people. I'm just trying to say if we would like to have one study or a study about learning analytics dashboards, we should have two arms designed with equal students, randomized, I mean, and the intervention should be very clear. One arm with dashboard, the dashboard is very controlled. We count what students use and what students don't. It's not very difficult at all.
Great, thank you. Then we have another question from Phil Winnie.
I'm not quite sure which question you're referring to.
It starts with, I'm not so surprised learning analytics dashboards
Yes.
don't have much impact.
Well, yes, because most of what I have seen delivered to learners or to teachers in dashboards are rather large grain variables, like, how often do you participate, or do you participate more at the end of the week than at the beginning of the week? And those are extremely far removed from whether the learner understands Newton's three laws of motion or how energy is exchanged in a catalytic chemical reaction. So my point was, unless the dashboards are giving advice to learners or telling instructors about what learners actually do while they learn particular content, the learners don't have any real direction about what to do differently.
Yeah.
If I study the same way on Monday as I do on Friday, what difference does it matter when I study? Well, there is an answer to that. It would relate to something like spaced practice, but spaced practice is not what's referred to in the dashboard. So I think the dashboards, to put it rather impolitely, are just measuring the wrong things.
Yeah. I thank you, Professor Phil, for your comment. I think while doing this and preparing everything, I've been asking myself what makes us believe that dashboards or seeing the graphs will make people improve. I think it's a very good thing. It may be useful, maybe improve students something, but definitely they should be part of a larger recipe that they could be combined with some advices, some feedback. But on their own, the evidence is lacking not only in education, but also across the board. And one of the things I also noticed that there is a huge number of reviews in learning or learning analytics or education about dashboard that doesn't exist in other fields. I think we are somehow kind of thinking that dashboards on their own may be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe if I add something on that, I think there is also a discussion about like learning analytics. Okay, maybe we design for actionability. I mean, if we get away from, for example, we talk about learning analysis, as I highlighted in the background, that we look at learning analysis as the main intervention in learning analytics. So this is something as a field, and I think the discussion we had around this paper is, okay, if we think dashboard is the main kind of tool we go with as a final product, whatever we do in learning analytics, and if at all we don't have a way to actually assess whether it actually delivers what's intended to measure, then what's the other alternative? How do we, is the problem with the dashboard, or is it about what we say it is intended for? And as Phil highlights, maybe there's some metacognitive processes that can be supported by a dashboard, but can you assess this at a level of whether there was a change in the performance because a student watched something about their performance, or they saw how much they speak during the meeting? Are we even in a position to measure how that actually helps them to perform better? Maybe there are many instances where this kind of information can improve the students' or learners' reflection on their own behaviors, but can we infer this in terms of learning outcomes? So I think maybe it's trying to reduce the amount of maybe expectations of what we infer on what a dashboard can actually do, because I don't think it's completely useless. I think it remains an important tool, but of what importance should the dashboard be? And then if we want to measure whether it works, how should we measure it? Is it a best way to actually measure it in terms of saying whether it led to students learning or better learning outcomes? Let us look at what's the purpose of the dashboard and how do we then measure this kind of effect without saying whether it led to learning, because there's so many variables, there's so many kind of confounders in between there that actually make it not happen or even not see any effect.
I can quickly jump in. It's Phil again. Come to the workshop at the Learning Analytics Conference next Tuesday on trace variables. I'm giving a talk, and I'll happily share the slides to whoever would want, that I think offers my answer to Roger's call for what should we do.
I'll be at
Great.
a conference, so I'll try to join that.
Yeah, well, if you signed up for another workshop or you're unable to attend the conference in Dublin,
Yeah.
Email me, and once I'm finished with my slides, which will probably be just before the workshop, I'll happily send them to anyone that would like them.
We're great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. We definitely can say hi there and try to,
Yeah.
Good.
I also have a question in a way related to this. Maybe also, it's a question that I wanted to ask last year at LAK, but didn't get to because there was very limited time at that point. So I think a very important, or for me, a very important question when building a dashboard or designing a dashboard is, what information do I want to show on the dashboard? And because I think this is in a way one of the most important questions next to how do I deliver this information to students, teachers, or whoever else. So I wonder if you actually looked at what type of information was shown on dashboard, because I think maybe we can look at also at the effectiveness of different types of information that we show, either on dashboards, or we also deliver it through text, and then we can compare what's the best way to deliver this piece of information on a dashboard through text feedback, or does it need to have another kind of intervention around it? So yeah, I also have a bit of a thinking, how can we talk about the effectiveness of dashboards without actually looking at the information that was shown on it? Because this again becomes we get into the question of heterogeneity again, but now in terms of what we have on the dashboard.
Absolutely, 100% agree. It's something that we looked for, but there is really very, very few information about it. And what really puzzles me all the time, if you look for dashboards, images, even in Google, you will find 3 or 4 dashboards only that are there. You will not find many photos or snapshots of dashboards. Roger just shared 2 or 3 of them. And this possibly 90% of the dashboard that we have idea what they show online. So Definitely, there may be some dashboards with some design or with some feedback or something that are effective more than others. But again, as I said, we couldn't find the evidence, and that doesn't mean that dashboards are ineffective. I also don't think that we should consider dashboards on their own, by their own self, or possibly can be mixed with other things, with prompts, with feedbacks, with teacher support, with other things. They don't have to be a standalone intervention. This is something I'm not thinking, why would they stand as a standalone? They're just part of just like providing somebody with a PowerPoint about chemical reactions. It doesn't have to be effective on its own. It needs to be also complemented with other. It's part of a big thing.
Yeah, and maybe to add on that, I think that's a very good question. And I think when it comes to, I can say in this particular study, we didn't really put much focus on what was exactly actually presented, but I think that is something worth actually looking at. I mean, in explaining, for example, for dashboards that reported some kind of difference or effect, okay, what kind of dashboard and what kind of features would actually have, is it about the dashboard itself? Because like when I look at the results here, for example, on the participation and students' participation, and you see some studies that were basing on LMS kind of stats and graphs on how students are participating in a discussion forum and providing all the statistics about that and what that actually, does that make them feel like, oh, maybe I should post more, I should do this, I should do that. And it's as you say, like it's the way we present the information could really matter a lot. And that's why like in my background, I was talking about like some efforts that are being presented in terms of providing, for example, using storytelling kind of principles to provide maybe narrative kind of information in terms of reports. You're not just representing data about your heart rates and like, oh, the heart rate went up at this time and at this point, and then your temperatures were high and low. I mean, what does this actually mean? In some cases, you may find that that kind of information may just increase the stress for the students. So the kind of visualizations and the kind of data that is being provided definitely could have an issue and the impact on how students end up receiving these kind of visualizations and the impact they have on the different kind of variables or constructs of interest.
Great, thank you. There are a lot of comments in the chat, a lot of discussion there, but I don't see any more questions. So if anybody else has a question that they would like to, Eman, are you there? Do you want to ask the question yourself?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for the very interesting literature. Actually, I have two questions. And now I'm working on developing a dashboard that not focusing on performance dashboard, but mainly on visualizing a process. So the first question is whether the dashboards that you investigated were mainly focused on or designed by researchers or designed by the participatory approach where end users do actually design the dashboards. Because if end users are not in the designing process, probably that's why maybe we cannot see an impact. Maybe end users not really may comprehend the data from the dashboard. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Thanks, Eman, for that great question. I think that's a very valid question, and I think it's a good debate going on in around human-centered learning analytics and how do we make sure that we co-design, because to be honest, that was not a kind of a very big focus point when you looked at the dashboards that we analyzed. So the focus was on, we implemented this dashboard, and the dashboard was how did it actually impact achievement, how did it impact ABCD? But we didn't go into details of, okay, how was this dashboard actually designed in the first place. And I totally agree with you. I mean, the literature has shown this. Okay, if you're designing a dashboard for students to promote their engagement, okay, what kind of indicators are you using? And it comes back to Iona's question as well. What kind of visualization are you showing? And who say that this visualization is actually suitable for that particular purpose? If it's for teachers, are the teachers actually feeling that these kind of visualizations will support the teacher in understanding how students are behaving in a learning management system, and how those insights can actually help them to make timely kind of interventions? So that's not something we checked, but I think if you're working on such a study, there is a review we worked with on with Joanna. I think I included it in the slides, where we are looking at, we call it a checklist for planning and designing learning analysis dashboards, and we looked at different studies on how different researchers. I think I took it out, Mohammed, so thank you. I shouldn't have. Yeah, I think it's on that slide. So we try to look at studies and how they are designed, how they are planned, and there we're asking questions. Okay, if you are designing a dashboard for teachers, who did you ask? Did you talk to the teachers or did you talk to the students? There is a study we looked at, for example, which was designing a dashboard for students, but we were talking to teachers. So the question is like, okay, we did the co-design, but we co-designed with teachers, but the dashboard is for teachers, for students. So is that a good approach? Okay, are the teachers telling you what the students need? Or is this the problem where we end up with a dashboard meant for students, but was the opinions of the visualizations and what to show were provided by the teachers? So that's a very good question, and I think that's something worth exploring and providing better context. And what Mohammed maybe forgot to highlight is that we are working on extending this this work to a meta-analysis, and I think all the variables people are talking about on the design of the dashboards, on the type of the visualization themselves, I think these will be key things to really include in this study to really get a big context of what kind of if we have any good practices and good examples of worked out or successful dashboards, how do they look? How are they designed? What kind of visualization do they use and provide? So all details could actually be very relevant in that respect.
Great. Thank you very much. Since we have run out of time, we will now close this this webinar. First, a very big thank you to Mohammad and Rogers for being here today and sharing your work with us. And of course, a big thank you for everyone that joined us today and had such a productive discussion. Thank you very much. Before we leave, I will post in the chat the link to our website where you can find the recording of today and also where you can register to our newsletter. And because this webinar is highlighting Best Paper Award from last LAK, we are curious to see what brought you here, whether you are joining us at LAK next week. And in preparation for that, you're also joining this webinar or you're interested in this topic or both. Thank you very much again, everyone, for being here. And see you in around 2 months when we will have our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you so much.